emergency station.
Right. Fabulous. Yay! Oh my gosh. Hey, Disco Citizens. I'm Teri Gamble.
And I am Julia Marchese.
Welcome to Horror X, a collaboration between the George A. Romero Foundation and our podcast, Horror Movie Survival Guide.
Horror X explores the femmes who make fright films fantastic-orgal and palavers with them about their experiences in film and horror.
I am so excited to dive into more of Georgia's work through the lens of this insanely talented lady.
And you know her as Sarah, the lead of the 1985 film Day of the Dead, and she's one of the original films in the Maestro's Dead series.
Yes. Lori comes from a long lineage of Romero collaborators. Her father was in the original, the penultimate, the show that changed my life, Night of the Living Dead.
and her memoir, which we're going to talk about, I've read it, is amazing. I'm going to tell an offbeat tale of survival is out now, so we will get into that.
Yes, please welcome to Horror X, Miss Lori Cardille.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here, and it's so nice. It's women-centric. That's it for me. Trying to make the world a better place the way it's going right now.
Right? We need this energy. Femmes helping femmes. It's really important.
It is. And I think that we have a unique lens to look at it from. And I think that we're excited to see where your love for all of it started, right?
Yeah.
And I know that you have horror roots in your blood.
I do. Well, my dad, actually, his name was Bill Cardille. Chilly Billy is what they called him here in Pittsburgh. He was like Elvis. In 1968, he was like Elvis in Pittsburgh. That's how popular he was.
That's hot.
Yeah, even it's just unbelievable. I mean, he passed away about 6 years ago. It was very sad for my whole family and for Pittsburgh. I mean, we were at the Pirate game, and there he was on the big jumbotron. They were put his picture up. So he was really an iconic figure, like George was. And Pittsburgh, although my dad remained here and continued to do radio and other television. He was like the local hero in 60s and 70s and into the 80s, because he did all kinds of things. He produced shows there. He was
the Schiller Theater.
Yeah, Schiller Theater, and then wrestling, and he did the weather, and through those years. So he was able to stay in one market. And George saw him, loved his show, and actually asked him if he would play this little part that he was making, in this little film that he was making. And so he asked my father, and my dad said, "Of course, George." And so George, to this day, when we were at MoMA, when they redid the film and made it beautiful, the Night of the Living Dead, he got up there and he thanked my father for being a big part of his early career, for helping him, because my dad would plug it on Chiller, and there was,
How did they originally meet? Do you remember?
I don't know if that's where they met. I don't know if George just called he may have just called the station, because that's how I remember. I mean, that's what Dad would always say. So there was this young filmmaker, and he came, they didn't know each other, as far as I know. I mean, that never came up, but it would have,
Right. So did your dad show you horror movies when you were young? Did you get to watch them on TV when he was hosting?
It's funny. I hated horror. I have to say, I never liked, I was an anxious child. I had, some trauma in my childhood, not regarding my father or mother or anything, and we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
And so any kind of extra, anxiety-producing thing would just flip me out. It would just be too much, and I couldn't understand why people liked that. So, but Dad would bring home the big reels was it 35 millimeter or
Yeah.
and he would have this projector, so he would screen them before, he aired them.
That's the dream. Did you see our faces?
Yeah, I saw. That's so
You got
great.
the preview, but on 35, like at your house. This is
Yeah, at the house, but I didn't take
unbelievable.
advantage. I didn't take advantage because I was too afraid. But
Oh,
later on, when I was a teenager, there's some funny stories about that. I started watching Dad so that I was kissing my boyfriend on the couch, when I was in high school, and Dad was on TV, which is really weird. And
sorry, I
I
can't
knew.
imagine.
Really, it's so sick. But Dad had two shows. He did two movies that he showed. So he had the airwaves very late at night. So I knew when he was leaving the station, Denny, you got to go home now.
At least you have a time call. You have a heart out,
Right?
So you know that he has to leave.
Right? Like, Dad's done with work. Get out of
I
here.
know.
But
Oh my
how did
God.
it feel to watch your dad in Night of the Living Dead? Because then you have this weird disconnect, right? You're like, oh, it's Dad.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because it was Dad and that was his work, And in fact, it was sometimes annoying because we would go out as a family for dinner and people, would always come up to Dad. And he was so gracious. He was such a great guy that way. And he loved his fans and they loved him. So I was a little resentful sometimes as a kid. And I know my mom was. And
Oh,
but when Dad was on Night of the Living Dead, I got to go to the premiere of Night of the Living Dead.
how was that?
Oh my! Well, here's my little saga. I went and the big limo picks us up. It was really cool. I must have been 13, 14 years old, and maybe even a little younger. But we got there. I was so anxious. Oh my God, that I had to sit through this film. So I was sat at the end of the row and I would keep walking out, going into the bathroom or going into the hallway, It's pretty sad. I love horror movies now. I really enjoy them now. The fans have taught me how to really appreciate that. And also all those issues of trauma have been resolved for me. And so I was able to be scared in a fun way.
Yeah, do you remember the film that suddenly you're like, oh, okay, I kind of get what's happening here and the artistry behind it?
Oh, wow. Yes. That, well, let me say, horror films were not as well, as an actor, they weren't as well received or respected by people in the business. I was trained to be a Shakespearean actress, to do classical things. I went to Carnegie Mellon, which is
Yes, that's like
Iconic.
serious.
Yeah, serious theater stuff. So
We're
for me,
we're theater babies too. So if you want to talk Shakespeare, we're all about it. Like
Yeah, we
cool.
met on our way to England studying theater. So
Oh my God, that's so great.
that's how we met. We met on the airplane doing our year abroad when we were in college. So
Oh, where'd you guys go to school?
in University of East Anglia in Norwich is where we met.
Oh my God. Oh, that's so neat.
yeah, but we came from the UC. We're from California, so we came from the UC system here in California.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Really?
yeah.
I feel like there's kind of a lot of kind of Shakespeare to horror crossover. Like I like to think about like Tony Todd in Candyman, and that is like an Othello type of energy and performance, and you feel like just as much.
Oh yeah,
absolutely, and I got to play Rosalind and As You Like It, so that's a great part. And I can see parallels, well, especially to today, with transgender and all of that. Really would be interesting to play that now.
Yeah.
But so I got to understand the artistry. I went through a period when I was a teenager of kind of being like embarrassed because I was going to be an artiste. I'm pouring my soul out here, but it's the way it was, and I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed that I was so like, it's just young. What can I say? Young. And when I graduated, and I started to realize, oh my God, my dad is really a cool man, and of course, Night of the Living Dead is such an unbelievable movie when you really sit there and watch. And George's site, and it was really scary. These people, there were zombies in like some Caribbean funny B movies, but this was like as everybody knows now, it's been analyzed so many times, but people actually coming out of their coffins with their clothes on that they were buried in. I remember that alone was so effing scary. And I thought, wow, that's pretty brilliant. And then the whole thing with the main character and what was happening in the 60s.
Yes.
And the shocking ending was so incredible.
Yes. I'm a fan of a downbeat ending, so that ending to me was like, yes, even though it's horrible,
It's
right?
horrible, but it's so real, and I think unfortunately still so timely. I mean,
my
that's that
God.
movie, you can literally watch it every year, which I almost do, and it's like it becomes more and more relevant, unfortunately, every time.
Can you believe it? Well, it's up to you guys. It's up to your generation and the younger generation, even to really, because we were fighting in the 70s, you know,
We're still fighting.
Yeah.
And well, can you talk about that as well in terms of getting into Carnegie Mellon and then going through and doing your soap opera and getting into acting, and how in the 70s or the 80s, how that would have been different than it is now to be in that space?
Oh, there was so much there was such a misogynistic approach to how you were cast, and you know what you would hear from the directors that were auditioning you. And oh my God, I have some just crazy stories that never ever would, I mean, that happened now. I mean, if you see She Said, the movie, you know, it was like just horrible then. I can't say, well, there was one time where there was this casting, you know, the casting couch situation.
Yeah.
But what it was mostly was just the attitude of the men, and you know, thinking that they would, you know, say such horrible things. I'll tell you something. I was auditioning. ABC had this big audition to see the new talent out there, and they had a Broadway stage they put up, and I did the children's hour, which interesting, right? So you know, plays
Also
with
timely.
Yes.
yeah, another timely thing.
Yeah.
And and there were a lot of women that were in that time, like Suzanne Summer types, this for television, right? So I did this really, I thought, and I was told it was a really good audition, but they told my agent was, this is, I'm going to say something that's not cool, right? But I'm telling you, quote, she comes off as such a dyke. That's what they said to me. That's what my agent told me that they said. Yeah.
How did you get the courage to persist in something that you knew was going to be so difficult?
Well, you know, it's such a, when you don't know better, and that's kind of the way it was. And first of all, I cried. I was so upset. I thought they have nothing. Devastating. They have no idea about talent and how hard we've, you know, that I worked. And, you know, you can call yourself an actor, but to be a real actor, you know, to study and to, you know, because you both were in theater.
Yeah.
And it was such I felt like, where do I belong, really? I mean, I was sometimes I think I was sort of, you know, the fact that George cast me as this strong female character was so fantastic, obviously, because but the other thing was what was happening at the same time. And, you know, that was very hard. That's why I did do a lot of theater in New York and repertory stuff. But, you know, I just, it was trying to make sense of all of this. It was, you know, you're so confused about, you know, you go through, what's wrong with me? You know, you sort of internalize it. And I did, especially then, because of my childhood experience of trauma. You know, you carry that before you work on all of that psychologically. You carry that with you, and which they call now PTSD. When I was first diagnosed, they said, well, you know, they didn't have the term PTSD. They said, you know, Vietnam veterans, when they came back from the war, they had this thing. It was called like shell shock, and that's what you have. So this was like in 1986, and you know, so I was very reactive unconsciously during those years. And so when George, when we did Day of the Dead, it was such a wonderful for me.
That's right at that time that you said you got diagnosed then too, or you were getting.
Yeah, it was right after that. I moved back I had a horrible postpartum depression after we decided to come back to Pittsburgh because 4 years later, because we got this idea of what it was like to live in Pittsburgh with two sets of grandparents, because I met my husband. He happened to be from Pittsburgh.
Oh.
Yeah. So we came back because I was pretty established in my career. And I thought, if I'll get it on, I can fly back and forth if I want. But mostly I wanted to come back and raise my children and be with them because I was like 37 something. And I had all my 20s, I had worked constantly, 30s, and I would be on a set. I remember being, I was on the set called The Equalizer, which is now a woman plays that part. But back then, it was, the British actor. I'm sorry, I'm blanking.
Yeah, no, I remember. Yes.
Right. So I played an assassin from Smith.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I remember being on set. This was after Day, and I thought, I just so conflicted because I had a little baby at home and, 2-year-old, whatever. And I just, I was so conflicted. I was also rolling in this trauma. I just thought, I'm just going back to Pittsburgh, and, but so I had Jake, my son. Katie was 4 years older. So Jake was born after doing Day. And we had planned on moving back as soon as after he was born. So I had Jake in New York. And 6 weeks later, we moved back to Pittsburgh. And, my work was my identity. It was sort of where I sublimated all my negative feelings, my depression, my anxiety. It was in my work. It was my drug in a way. And so I didn't realize I would have such a strong reaction. But I came back here and I had a postpartum depression that I had to be hospitalized.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, and that's when, after that happened, and that happens with people, they start to remember when you have a big assault to the body, like birth or a death, sometimes that'll blow the mind to remember things that you were
awakens that sense memory. Yeah.
Right. And that was what was happening to me at that time. And I thought, I've lost my mind. I have lost my mind. I'm gone. I mean, I am done. I just didn't know what was going on. And, but the good news is this was at St. Francis Hospital in Pittsburgh. And eventually I started talking about depression and anxiety and eventually abuse. But what happened was they nominated me for this Rocky Blyer Award, which was the courage to come back. And that maybe of all the awards, that's that was the one I was most proud of, really, because I broke down. I mean, I just couldn't hold it together anymore. And Jake's birth, and I had a C-section. I had pulmonary embolism in New York with it. So we're moving here.
That's a lot.
Everything was there. So it was I have my own horror story.
Yeah.
I really, and which is why it was so hard so once I did a psychoanalysis in New York City, like Woody Allen on West End Avenue, which was fabulous. So, and I did some great therapy around this, and eventually just became an advocate and a person that just helps people that are going through it. So that's
to the point where you've had the courage to tell your story in a book. So let's segue right into that. So you have your book, I'm going to tell, where we talk about you being a survivor. So we have a survivor on screen and off screen. And I love that the book is filled with drawings and things that, that really, it's not, but you say it's offbeat tale, right? So it isn't this kind of linear thing, which I think is how memory works. Can you talk about the book a bit?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I was writing it, what I found when I realized I had a book, I think humor got me through a lot. It always does. My family is the goofiest family you ever met, and we're creative and offbeat, really offbeat. And my daughter and son, they're just incredibly successful in their creativity, and my husband's a nut, we're all nuts. My dad was Chilly Billy, for God's sake.
I think that's the coolest, man. I really do.
Yeah, we were just this creative family, So, so the book, when I was going through a lot, I ended up, there is a story here, and I sometimes think I should write this story it was my uncle, and he was a doctor, and I called the licensing bureau because he was my doctor, and I was able to report it. This was in 1980, like I said, it's 87 or, and they were going after him, the licensing bureau, and I'm working with these investigators, all these people. They were down this because you couldn't bring it. It would be he said, she said, and there weren't any laws there, but they were going to use the law like if a doctor operated on you and they left a sponge in you,
right? Malpractice.
Yeah, well, you have 2 years year of discovery. A sponge, you get to. I had a 2-year window where I could go after him. And what happened was I stumbled upon a big investigation. I got a call. It's a long story, but make it real short, from somebody that identified working with the FBI because he was a friend of my mother's friend who was a therapist in Erie with these young girls that were being given drugs by my uncle. It was just, there's so much stuff that just.
So it uncovered like a whole.
Oh, and
whole ring, kind of.
Yes, and they said, look, this is dangerous, Lori. Who are all the people you spoke to? And I gave them the people at the licensing bureau, et cetera, and I was talking to every day. And from that day on, they would not return my call. It was that bad. And it turned out that my uncle was turning against other doctors. He was turning state's evidence against other doctors who were involved in some kind of Medicare scam, whatever.
Wow.
He was like this one guy said, he was a bad guy, but we have to deal with bad guys to get information and blah, blah, blah. So he, but so the book basically, because it's a long involved story but the book, I was struggling, and I would go wake up in the middle of the night and start writing. And it was it was like psychoanalysis. It was consciousness that would come up, it's not, don't worry about punctuation or whatever. And I used to draw these cartoons that were, I called them humoroons. They were sort of philosophical things in a box. And and I was a photographer. I'm a photographer also. And so, I realized that, this is like a book that could help people. And I got it together, and somebody told me they were using it at some university to show the mind of somebody that has been abused, and what they go through when they remember these things, and how the mind is so screwed up, and how it clarifies itself when you get the right help, So that's that. So Sarah, being this kind of heroine in a movie, I had it in me. I knew how I would want to play her. I learned how to play her as we were filming. And, but I really needed to come back to break down, to remember. And with that, wanting to be a better mother to my children. But, so I ended up doing theater in Pittsburgh at the really wonderful theaters here. But it was a choice not to continue working in a large scale, national scale, because it's just the way it happened. I wouldn't change it. Sometimes I think of all the parts I could have played, and, and what it's very funny because a lot of young filmmakers, I'm making films with them now as an old woman. And, so I feel complete. I would
hire you 10 times. You're a powerhouse. My goodness.
But I get very emotional, of course, with this, because I'm so grateful. I'm so, toward the end of a life, you start to think of, everything. And it's amazing that I'm here and being able to talk to you and reaping the benefits of George's wonderful movie.
But this is, you so much credit is due to you that you've created a character with so much depth that it's still resonating so hard in 2023. And because that opening bit with you is in the Stranger Things in the second season, right? So I think that probably also brought it to a whole nother generation, which I think was probably the Duffer Brothers' intention. So did you see a kind of rise in popularity after that came out?
Yeah, that was really nice. Well, there is a big following at the conventions.
Yeah,
Amazing.
rightly so.
Yeah, well, I don't do a lot of them, but I do like a couple a year now. But Richard Liberty called me. He played Dr. Logan. This was like, in the 90s. And he said, Lori, there's this thing where, you sign autographs and you can make money doing it. And people, it's the fans of horror and all this. And I said, we can't charge people for autographs because you didn't. I mean,
Right.
That was like a no, it was like, oh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
But with time, you realize it's a big business. And
Huge.
And I've given a lot to charity actually too. But it's so we got a sense of how this movie is really
Sure.
important to a lot of people, and we were shocked because of how it wasn't it wasn't accepted back then. And
that's because George was a prophet.
Totally.
Oh my God.
I just feel like, especially right now, over these last few years, rewatching anything during the pandemic of his was just all of a sudden it took on a whole nother weight. And then with all the attacks on female rights right now, watching your film right now, I was like, I told Julia, because I was like, okay, in preparation, we're chatting with you again today. I was like, okay, I got to rewatch. And it's just like each moment, I told her I paused so many times because it's just so live for us right now.
It is.
Ooh.
It is
because you have which is worse, right? You have
the military industrial complex
zombies.
or zombies. I don't know.
But I've helped my friend behind one of the convention booths for a day once, and it was fascinating because to you made one movie and you're done, right? But to everybody else, it's this thing where it continues to live on. And so it was fascinating to me to have people come up and tell him stories about how you've affected their lives that you would otherwise have no way of knowing. So you have this kind of glimpse into like, oh, it's creative, and every single personal life has created this thing.
They have their own relationship to you in this film now.
Yeah. And I get that because I have that too with people that I admire, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I saw them, I would, when people sometimes, people are nervous to meet me, and I understand because I would be nervous to meet like Brad Pitt or somebody, but the thing is that I always say, well, I'm just a mom, honey, but I don't want to break their illusion either,
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, the biggest gift I've been able to give back is recognizing, is thanking the fans, thanking them, because we got slammed in the beginning and we never got to, in fact, I just did this big interview, and the person, I'm not mentioning names or anything, but the person that interviewed me was talking about the male character, didn't even acknowledge that it was about a strong female character in the 80s. It was all about the military and, that fight and the rape tension in it and all that, but it had not talking about Sarah's role, that was really.
I mean, she's the role. It is the role. I mean, you open the freaking movie. It's your face. It's from your point of view.
Yes. And George, it was George's movie. I mean, I did George's beautiful work, and I was able to work with George and bring this character to life because we both spoke the same language.
And did he approach you with the script?
Yeah. What happened was my husband knew George was friends with, he was friends with my dad, of course, but I hadn't seen George since that time when I was 14, and seeing Night of the Living Dead. And so I'm doing this play in New York called Reckless by Craig Lucas. It was an offbeat play. The character is on stage, runs it like crazy, is on stage the whole time, jumps around. It's just confused and happy and funny. And so Jim said, asked George to come and see this with Richard Rubenstein. And that it was just they were in town, and he, somehow, and George came, and for my dad, I'm sure. And right after in the back, after doing it, he offered me the part.
Wow.
Yeah, and he said, "I'm writing this play. I'm writing this movie, and I would like you to play this character I'm writing." And then he was writing the first script that he wrote, so it was still a little bit different. And it was like
different how?
Yeah.
Because it was more about special effects and explosions and more not less character driven, which is what
I like the way it is now. I think that's what I like about it so much.
Yeah, I think women, people get that, but mostly that's why they were disappointed. It wasn't like Dawn of the Dead, and it wasn't, right? So they expected something at least similar. It was so dark, like you said, you like bad ending, but this ending was sort of ambiguous, and it even got ripped for that too, which I can understand.
Really? So tell me about when it came out. I don't know what the response, because it's so beloved now. I can't remember. I can't imagine it being anything else.
It was 1985, and it came out. It opened in New York. I had one of those like wonderful things where I got to. I was in London shooting a commercial for something, and I was able to take the Concorde back. It was so great. So I took the Concorde back.
Fancy.
Yeah, I know. I was like, ooh, and I'm going to the premiere of my movie.
Excuse me.
So, it was really heady. And we were there, and it got some booze. At the end.
Why?
Oh my God! I'm telling you, Siskel and Ebert, that group, they didn't like it. They said the acting was terrible.
They had a lot of bad calls, those guys.
Yeah, what movie were they watching?
I don't even know.
I don't know, but it hurt. Because George, at that, he's always said that was his favorite of the trilogy, and which is. I'll accept that. Thank you, George. And because we're together and intimate with all of us working as artists, and not that everybody else wasn't an artist, don't get me wrong. It's just that it was different for him too. Yeah. It was dark. And I think he, and we all got along so well, and we had fun, and it was a 3-month shoot in a cave. And
in a cave.
What was that like? My goodness. With a bunch of dudes.
Yeah. Oh, we're all so close to this day. I mean, really.
You are?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, my God. I was just, Teri and Jarlath, the Irishman and the Jamaican Caribbean man. I was just with them in New York. I mean, we love each other. Yeah, we love
them. They were probably, we were just talking together. We love that. We love them too.
Yeah, we got to talk to John Amplas when we did an episode with him on Martin, because we're a big fan of his, and awesome that he got to be brought back in Day of the Dead.
Yeah, John and I are really good friends. I mean, he lives in Pittsburgh. So Tom Savini lives one little neighborhood away from me. We're all
tell them all we love
Pittsburgh.
them. Please tell John though that the girls from Horror Movie Survival Guide say hello. We love him. So yeah.
Oh, I will. I know why you love him. He's a great guy. He was great in Martin. Did you ever see Martin?
Martin's one of our like tippy top movies of all time. We have this interesting, and we did a podcast with some folks a few years ago where they asked us to bring a vampire movie, and we brought them Martin, and they were like, is he? And I'm like, I don't know. Is he? Let's talk about it. Like,
that's the whole thing, because it's like very ambiguous as well. And so some people have a whole thing about, is he really a vampire? And I love the lore on that.
What
too.
makes a
vampire?
Yeah, right. It's a great performance that he did. I mean,
but he also, George has a lot, also others, I think he's really good at bringing unusual leads to the screen, because you have not only
You got
Dwayne
Johnson
Jones
Theater as well.
and Ken Foray, but
Yeah.
you also have Season of the Witch, right, which is another movie that's very female focused and very strong,
Very feminist forward.
yeah.
Mhm.
Where he's amazing. How does he do it?
Yeah, he was ahead of his time. In fact, I did the audiobook of The Living Dead with Bruce. Oh, he was in Willard. Oh, I'm blanking his name. I'm so sorry, Bruce. Anyway, he's wonderful voice, good actor. He's still working, and I'm so sorry, Bruce, that I'm blanking your name right now because I'm old and I'm forgetting things. But it was a 900-page book, and George wrote it, never finished it. And
The Living Dead.
Yeah, The Living
One that
Dead.
Daniel Krauss.
The one that
finished.
Daniel
Yeah, we interviewed Daniel and reread the book. It's wonderful.
I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Oh my God. Because I had to, we were acting and doing different things, and oh my God.
Now we have to listen to the audiobook because we read it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you. But yeah, so it was I mean, and George had died already. And, you can just see with the pandemic, and that book came out. And in fact, I did it in the studio. It was during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't want to go to New York. We have a place in New York. My children live there. But I didn't want to go to New York because it was in the middle of the pandemic. So there was a little studio here that would be safer. And that's where I did it. But yeah, it was just,
that's awesome.
Crazy to hear George, and Daniel did a beautiful job.
He did. And he did it with so much passion and love.
So much love and respect, and just what a dear heart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, and he's incredible, right? Yeah, yes. He did The Shape of Water with Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah.
Can you talk about being a woman? In what way has that enhanced your time as an actor and in film? And you've done it all, right? You've done commercials, you've done theater, you've done TV, you've done film. So we've talked about some of the downsides, but what do you think are some of the upsides
of being a woman
in the industry?
Oh, just in the industry. Well, see, I can't, because I kind of, like I said, I jumped out of the mainstream industry, right? So, and I think I don't know, because each form is a different art form, and it's also a different set of problems, and also its strengths, right? So the theater has its own thing, and which is incredibly there's I think it's getting better for women, obviously. George wrote Sarah at the time. Sigourney Weaver was doing the sci-fi thing, and that was a big breakthrough, I think. But it's still, look how long it's taken, for women to have their voice. Look what's going on now.
Sure. Yeah. But this is part of what we're doing, is we want to celebrate that, right? Even though I think that this is why we wanted to talk to people who have also been in the business for a long time, to see how it is different and how much we're improving and how that feels, because I think that that's something that's obviously important to all of us, and to support everybody and support women and women in horror and women in life.
Yeah. Yes, and there are so many wonderful parts in horror now, really. And I think what I look to do is, when young filmmakers ask me to be in their films, I pick the ones that are meaningful, that are not meaningful. So I've been lucky that way, because I don't care to do what I don't want to do. My life is good. I have a grandson. We have a grandson, and I've done it, and I feel grateful. And I have other ways of being expressive and creative, just photography mostly. But so I've been lucky to do these projects that have a lot of meaning. In fact, I did something with the GARF. It'll be coming out. In fact, Suze is in it. Suze Romero.
Ooh.
Yeah, she is so good in it. Ooh. And it's with people with disabilities. There are most of them in the film. So, I relate. There's all kinds of disabilities, right? And I always felt like I was disabled by my depression. And trauma. But I don't mean to be a downer about all that too, because once you go through all of that and face it and get the right help, you have a life that, I mean, my life is wonderful. I am, I've been able to incorporate a lot of that into myself and to sublimate it in other ways. And I would never be the person I am now with all that, the suffering that goes in life. Somebody asked the Dalai Lama, how do you reach enlightenment? Not that I'm enlightened, trust me, but but he said, you suffer. That's what he said. That's how, so I've been a meditator since 1976. So I'm not
transcendental. Do you TM?
I started with TM. I started with TM for like 30 years. I did TM. Okay. Now I'm doing more Vipassana mindfulness from Southeast Asia. Yeah. So it's all the same, though. It all gets to the same place.
Yeah, right. Connecting to your core and just, I think honestly, don't say it's a downer. I think what's really wonderful is your candor and being able to express that, because I think me personally, I'll speak for myself, we've all gone through so much.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes it feels like, oh, that's the thing that's stopping me, when no, it can really actually be the thing once you integrate it into your life that can actually help you in your creation and moving forward. And just, there are ways to make something beautiful out of those terrible things.
Absolutely. So. Yeah. And there's nothing embarrassing about calling yourself a victim. A victim. You were a victim of a crime.
Yeah.
You don't have to live like the world is against you. It doesn't mean that. It means, yes, I was a victim of a violent crime, and so it's people think it's a weakness or a weak word. It's just a fact. And, you can live the rest of your life. And like you said, you become a stronger person. I'm able to, do those kind of things it's all about helping people now. I mean, it's all about giving back. I feel so blessed.
You've helped us today.
Yeah, absolutely.
But our question that we like to ask everybody in this, how has George Romero made an impact on your life?
Oh, in my life now. To hold on to your dream. Don't have to give in to other people wanting to take your vision and change it to make money on you. I think that, like I said, I to pick things that are worthwhile in your range of what is worthwhile to you. It's personal, right? George, he would have made so much more money and done if he was more mainstream and went along with what the other people in Hollywood, that's what, it's just they say Hollywood. That's a whole different ballgame,
It doesn't really exist, really. It's just kind of a nebulous.
Doesn't exist, right? But there is a star making. But there's a star making machine, right?
Yeah.
And there's a publicity thing that goes on to make people, who they are, even though a lot of them are incredibly talented. And there's a great stuff coming out, beautiful. But, whatever your art form is, or however you want to be an actor, go to Hollywood, be a star. It just was never George's thing. And it was not my thing either. I was never comfortable in that role of, being the center of attention. It was all about the work for me, honestly. It was about the creativity and so George and I was everybody on that set, the actors are like that, still are like that. And, to do things that have quality to you. And look, if you need money and I did commercials, for God's sake. I made a lot of money in commercials, which allowed me to do, other things. That's why I got out of the soap operas, because I was afraid of getting stuck there. And I didn't think it would be as creative. So for me as an actor, I learned a tremendous amount. I just graduated from CMU and I got these nice parts.
That's great.
But I didn't want to get stuck there, So, so I did, I did a movie called Parole with James Naughton and Ellen Barkin, and it was a big movie of the week, they used to call it. It was going to be, but listen to this, it was going to be a series. I was a flautist for the Boston Symphony, and James was a detective, scrappy guy. And what happened was, it was about a convict, and when they tested it, the police, Sting did the music. I mean, it was incredible. Oh. And so James and I were going to be the two characters that would be moving on. It tested back then, and they said the audience doesn't want to see a con of the week, like, you know, like
they do now.
Criminal. They sure do now. Yeah, see? I guess. Wow. So that was a great honor to do that. But I mean, those things are wonderful when you're an actor to get. It's great. I mean, you get all kinds of other stuff.
You've been an actor, you're a writer, you're a photographer, you're a cartoonist, you're you know, all of these wonderful things.
Yeah.
Artist.
Well-rounded, multi-hyphenate artist. I love it.
Thank you.
Lori,
but my daughter,
amazing. You're amazing.
Thank you.
So tell us where you could, people, if they want to find your book, if they want to find you online, where can they find you?
Well, I am on Instagram. Some of my photographs are there. Amazon, of course, you can get my book, I'm going to tell.
Highly recommended.
Yep.
Be Tale of Survival. It's not expensive. All the money goes to helping people that have been abused. And, you know, I don't go on Facebook that often. I do promote conventions sometimes, and you can always reach out on Instagram and I'll get back to you.
Yes,
awesome.
and you also person to person when the George Romero Foundation was helping with my horror short, I Know What You Need, you were one of the people who backed it. So she is really practicing what you're preaching, and artists.
Producer?
Yes.
We're co-producers, Lori. We're co-producers.
Oh, isn't it? I'm telling you, you did a beautiful job. Honestly, it was such an honor. Honestly, here you are, these two beautiful young women doing it. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Okay, she made me cry. Thank you so much.
No, really,
thank you for joining us today. You can listen to before I can't say anything else, you can listen to our hand to heart. You can listen to our podcast wherever we spell it, anywhere you like to listen, everyone watching, wherever you find your podcast. And you can hear Julia and I take deep dives every week into different horror films and dissect how you can survive and become a final girl like Lori.
But you also have to check out the George Romero Foundation, which is dedicated to restoring Romero's work and includes seldom seen pieces like the amusement park. If you haven't seen it, watch it because it's amazing.
Very, very good.
And keeping an archive as well, and they're helping the next generation of young filmmakers
like us. Oh,
and my dad's getting archived too at the
yes. Oh, amazing. So thank you everyone for watching. Please do feel free to reach out to Julia or myself online. We'd love to interact, sounds like Lori does too.
So Lori, thank you so much. Thank you all for watching. We will see you next time, and thanks for hoping your days and nights are fantastic oracle.
Woo, woo, woo.
You're beautiful women.
Thank you.